Thanks, everybody. Father Conley, President Regan, Principal Hughes, members of the Board of Trustees, Golden Jubilarians from the class of 1968, distinguished faculty, but most importantly, you graduates of the class of 2018, and especially your families and friends. You know, it's a terrific honor for me to be here with you today. I'm told that the class of 2018 is one of the strongest BCI has had in many years, both academically and athletically. So while your diploma may not actually include the term rock star, it probably should. I'm also humbled and aware that previous commencement speakers have included luminaries such as a marathon bombing hero, a legendary college hockey coach, renowned generals, and a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. All, I might add, BC High alums. So I wondered, what in the world did President Reagan want an expert on satellite television for here today? I recognize most of you millennials probably don't know what pay television is, but I'm guessing she might have needed some help figuring out her bill. I'm not sure. You know, my dad, BC High class 1945, was a wonderful man. He always said to me that the single greatest gift he could give his sons was a BC High education. And my Uncle Francis, my brothers Tim and Greg, and my nephew Chris all know firsthand how right he was, and so do I. So in that spirit, let me start by asking all of you proud graduates to please stand and thank the people that gave you this truly incredible gift, your wonderful parents, and the terrific BC High faculty and staff. Now, I have to tell you, being back on Morrissey Boulevard brings back a flood of great memories, although I don't remember this building, Grace. You know, when I showed up here in September 1966, I was the only freshman from Walpole, taking the train to South Station, the subway to Columbia Point, and walking over the footbridge to make sure I was here in homeroom 1C by 8:15. Other things I recall vividly: selling ice cream in the cafeteria to make a bit of lunch money, being a proud member of Brian Donaher's Homeric Academy, perhaps most especially 4 years on the debate team with a terrific partner, Steve Fix, and even serving Jug a time or two. But I promise, I didn't come here just to reminisce. What I really want to do is talk about 3 of the most important things I've learned in life, all of which had their roots here at BC High. They're lessons involving how you go about approaching life's opportunities and challenges, and most importantly, how you deal with people. All right, only 3, guys. 1, view the world broadly. 2, never stop learning. And 3, not surprisingly, continue to be a person for others. Now, I know I cribbed the last one from St. Ignatius, and I hope he'll forgive me. First, view the world broadly. In my mind, this is all about perspective. It's making a deliberate effort to see things objectively and through multiple lenses, always looking beyond your own, sometimes narrow viewpoint. When I think back on it, in so many ways, BC High was the first stop on my own life journey to a broader perspective. For instance, I experienced the city of Boston as a commuter. I learned a bit about St. Ignatius and Jesuit values. I got to read Homer's Odyssey in Greek. And I even came to learn a few things about English grammar, I think mostly from my Latin teacher. But then there was that single most important and most memorable lesson on perspective. Now think back. It's fall of freshman year, 1966, early September. I don't know what you'd heard about Jesuit discipline, and maybe it's a little different today, but I was in my class with Mr. Flanagan, S.J., English class. After twice calling out a student for fooling around in class, I think it was Mr. Lawando, Mr. Flanagan became clearly irate when it happened a third time. He went up and grabbed the boy by the collar, dragged him out into the hall. We're all sitting in our class looking at each other. Next thing we hear is banging on the lockers, and Mr. Flanagan shouting to the kid, "Go to the boys' room and wipe the blood off your face." Well, strangely, when Mr. Flanagan returned to class, he told us to write about what had just happened. Later, he collected the papers and we reviewed them. And each of the short papers was a little different, but for some reason, notably, no one mentioned anything about blood. And there was no criticism of the teacher. But as it all turned out, we'd been duped. Mr. Flanagan had orchestrated the whole thing with a very specific purpose in mind: to teach us to withhold judgment and to be better, more objective observers before we draw conclusions. He helped us realize that things aren't always as they seem, and we all have unconscious blind spots and biases. Now, another aspect of perspective in my mind is that you have to walk in the other person's shoes to see and understand the world as they see it. When I was CEO of PepsiCo International, that meant frequently getting out of the office and into the real world. It meant walking the streets of a South African township, visiting consumers at home in New Delhi, India, or even in Moscow, trying to understand how they lived, what was different about their lives, how they eat and drink, and especially snack, and how and where they shop. And all along the way, making sure to ask lots of questions and, most importantly, listening intently. My guess is it's a lot like those of you who had the chance to travel to Argentina or China or Ecuador or even inner city Boston or rural America. You broadened your perspective. And finally, in a world that's changing as fast as ours, you also need to see around corners to anticipate change. You can imagine that was really important for me at DirecTV, because internet video streaming and mobile technology were exploding all around us. I often thought of hockey great Wayne Gretzky, who famously said, "I don't skate to where the puck is, but to where it's going to be." So the point is, make a habit of always broadening your perspective, trying to get a grasp of both the big picture and the smallest details from multiple viewpoints before you make judgments or decisions. And of course, always try to be objective. Now, that second great lesson I learned is to never stop learning. Today is a huge milestone for each of you graduating from BC High, and you should be very proud. BC High taught me, and I'm sure you, actually how to study and how to learn, an incredibly valuable discipline. But guys, know this. While the 3-hour homework rule may no longer apply, when it comes to learning and personal growth, you're still in the first inning, or at least I hope so. If I look back on my life, tragically, too many kids I knew grew up and somehow peaked in 9th grade or 12th grade. Somehow or other, they just stopped learning and growing. Because you see, lifelong learning will not happen on its own. You have to actively seek, cultivate, and nurture it. And that starts with being open and curious. For me, it helped that I was a voracious reader and was fascinated by other cultures. It started actually with learning Russian here at BC High, and then having a chance to visit the Soviet Union as a college exchange student in 1973. And that continued in my career with my extensive international business travel. But it also meant learning about the importance of relationships and learning good people skills. And I always tried to make a point of stopping and reflecting a bit on what I've learned. The long international plane rides were great for that. I don't know, maybe driverless cars will be too, I'm not sure. But I should add that lifelong learning isn't always fun or even voluntary. Sometimes it comes from one's most painful experiences. And for me, that happened 7 years to the month after sitting where you are today. That happened to be when my dad died from liver cancer at the age of 50. Now, the BC High Jesuits made their way to Walpole to attend the wake and come celebrate his funeral. And as the oldest in my family, I gave the eulogy, certainly the hardest speech I've ever had to do. But I was already 27 with a family of my own, and 4 of my other siblings were already out of the house. But my 3 youngest siblings were 12, 16, and 17. And so my mom, with only a very modest life insurance policy to fall back on, had to pick herself up from her grief and go out and find a job. And she did that, becoming a math teacher at Ursuline Academy. Now, I mention this because watching her, I came to understand one of the single most important qualities of successful people: resilience. In my mother, I saw grit and determination in the face of a potentially devastating loss, and also the ability to reinvent herself and adapt to her new circumstances. And I can tell you today, I see it in my 34-year-old niece, Jessica. She's the wonderful mom of a beautiful 1-year-old daughter who's battling colon cancer. But she's a fighter with incredible courage and strength like her mom and my mom, and I know she's going to win her battle. Because that's what resilience is: never quitting and consciously adapting to change and carrying on with dignity. Now, you guys saw a much happier form of that just 2 months ago in the Super 8 hockey finals. And as Coach Flaherty said, you bet, I was watching streaming, guys. As Coach Flaherty said about BC High's amazing come-from-behind last-minute championship win, quote, "This is just another phase in your life where you learn that you don't quit. The character in that room is unbelievable," unquote. You see, Coach Flaherty knows character is the real source of resilience. And I know character is in the DNA of every one of you graduates of BC High. So finally, let me touch on that third lesson: continuing to be a person for others. Now, no doubt, as we heard from President Regan, you all have done this admirably at BC High through your great service work for those less fortunate. But as you go through life, I'd like you to think about how to extend the concept beyond charity and philanthropy, although they're really important. For some, like my classmates, Mike McGonigal, Norm Walsh, and John Lynch, being a person for others means using their wisdom and their experience to teach and mentor fellow BC High students. And I think you'd agree what they do is truly remarkable. But whatever your occupation in life is, first, remember to be a person for others when it comes to those closest to you, your family and your friends, and never take them for granted. You know, when I was CEO of PepsiCo International, I was traveling all over the world. But wherever I was, when it was Sunday morning in Walpole, I called my mom. And as much as it meant to me, I think it meant even more to her. And by the way, texts and Facebook and Instagram, they're all great, but they don't replace a human voice, much less a handwritten thank you note. So as you move on to your new address this fall, commit to stay connected with your loved ones and your friends. The other thing I want you to think about in being a person for others is you may not realize it yet, but BC High has also prepared every one of you to lead others. And therein, I think, lies a great opportunity and responsibility. But understand one lesson I learned early in my career. Others will not follow you just because you're a math whiz, a great athlete, or maybe speak 3 languages. I learned early on that people don't really care what you know until they know you care. I was reminded of that when I appeared on the CBS reality TV show Undercover Boss. It was a rare chance to connect personally and deeply with the men and women on the front line of my company, DirecTV. I got a chance to see up front how hard they worked every day and committed they were to serving our customers. And honestly, their life stories blew me away. I think it helped me realize the importance of connecting with, respecting, and valuing every employee across the company. Because whatever your job, in whatever company, we're all human beings seeking the same thing: to be happy and healthy and provide a good life for our families. And it brought to mind something my dad once told me. Michael, never forget, in the end, everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time. The best bosses I had in business taught me to have empathy and respect for the front line, to get to know my teammates personally, and to try to create a positive environment that inspired hope and optimism and encouraged trust. As I now look back, reflecting on my career, it was certainly the teams I built, the people I coached, and the success we achieved together that's what was most meaningful to me, not the financial results. But before I close, when it comes to being my personal role model of a person for others and values-based leader, one individual I was privileged to meet and get to know as a friend always comes to mind. He happened to be the closing speaker at a one-week leadership development program that I put together and ran for nearly 15 years at both PepsiCo and DirecTV. And his name is Paul Rusesabagina. Paul's not a big CEO or fancy consultant. He's from Rwanda, a small landlocked country in East Central Africa. Some of you might recall that in the 1990s it was the site of bloody ethnic strife between 2 tribes, the Hutus and the Tutsis. It left close to 1 million dead over 2 months, most by machete. Paul told us about growing up in Rwanda and how, as a simple hotel manager in the war-torn capital of Kigali, he risked his own life to protect and help evacuate more than 1,000 innocent refugees of both tribes from murderous militias. Now, Paul had seen things none of us could imagine, but he always talked about calmly consulting what he called his trusted advisor, which was his conscience, and leveraging his little black book, which was his network of friends and acquaintances. It was a very powerful story of the triumph of human dignity over hate and genocide, but it was an incredible example of a man who lived and led by values. To me, Paul is truly a man for others, and I'm certain St. Ignatius would agree. And I'm thrilled that several BC High students will get to visit St. Ignatius High School in Rwanda next year through the Hyde Center. They'll have a chance to see firsthand the amazing process of reconciliation. But since you won't be able to make the trip, I highly recommend you just watch the movie Hotel Rwanda, or perhaps read Paul's autobiography, No Ordinary Man. It's an easy read, and you'll see what I mean. So that's it. 3 things. View the world broadly, never stop learning, and most importantly, continue to be a person for others. 3 of the most important lessons I've learned in life. I hope they're as useful to you as they've been to me. Let me just close by saying that BC High has given each of you a great academic foundation, rock-solid values, and a rich network of friends and alumni. Now, class of 2018, it's your turn to go light the world on fire. I know you'll go far, and I wish you all the very best. Thanks.